Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I have Dr. Dana Cohen. She's an integrative medicine doctor. She's the author of a book about hydration, which we'll be focusing on in this interview, but she's nationally renowned as well. She's an internal and integrative medicine specialist, and she has a multidisciplinary approach and has treated thousands of patients using a variety of therapies. She's been in practice for nearly 20 years, and she actually trained under Dr. Robert Atkins. He was the author of Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution, and Dr. Ronald Hoffman was also a pioneer of integrative medicine and founder of the Hoffman Center in New York City. So, Dr. Cohen, thanks for coming. How you doing?
Hi, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, I don't know. I mean, maybe some people would think, why focus on hydration? It's obvious, drink water. And I'm sure other people like you, there's probably tons more nuance and importance to it. So, what prompted you to focus on hydration, and does it really need, hundreds of pages of description to really capture the nuance of it?
Well, so I ask every single patient that walks into my office, do you think you drink enough water? Do you think you hydrate well enough? And most of them say no, believe it or not, including my yogis and my sports, my athletes, those patients as well. But I want to say a statement, and I need it to sort of sink in. It is my belief that proper hydration is the single most important thing that you can do to treat and prevent chronic illness. Simple enough.
Wow.
It is the first step that you must take before you learn how, before you go on any kind of diet or, whatever it may be, you need to know how to hydrate properly. And none of us are doing it right. And it's not about drinking more water. It's about hydrating through, food, eating more hydrating foods, some water, but it's not necessarily about drinking, 8 glasses of water a day. It's one of the bylines on the book. 8 glasses a day is not the way, because number one, we're all different. We're all different sizes, we do different activities. But unfortunately, the other piece of the puzzle is that there's no way to measure perfect hydration either. As a practicing clinician, I see patients. That's what I do. I'm not a researcher. And I have learned that, patients are sort of cut off from the neck down. Like they don't feel their bodies. They don't feel themselves in their bodies, but we have to learn what feels right and good and healthy. And there are some signs and things that we can look out for. And then there are some things that we need to be doing in order to hydrate properly. And as we...
Yeah, I've noticed, with myself, I've gone through periods where I've, eaten really well and exercised a lot. And after a while you feel better. And then you say, oh, I didn't realize I could feel this way. And you don't realize how bad you were feeling before. So it makes sense that a lot of people just are disconnected from how they're feeling and how they could be feeling.
Yes, exactly. I always say that people with allergies, that's my biggest thing. Like they walk around not knowing what it feels like to feel like a normal human being until they clear up their allergies or even, whatever it may be. But yeah, people are just sort of inundated all day long with these things, and we're cut off from our physical well-being. We need to be in our bodies and feel what it feels like. And proper hydration is the first step. And there are some subtle things that we can look out for. I mean, I always say, I think for me, the single, what's the first sign of being dehydrated? And I just want to also clarify, we're not talking about overt dehydration here, meaning you got to get IV fluids or something. We're talking about this sort of subclinical or sort of day in, day out, this low-grade dehydration that I would dare say over 90% of the entire population suffers from, because we don't hydrate properly. And we live in environments that sucks the hydration out of us. We're eating foods that are dehydrating. We're taking medications that are dehydrating. So there's all these reasons as to why. And and the question is, well, what are we, what are we going to do about it? So one of the first signs to look for, and it's interesting, is fatigue. I think we all think, we get that 2:00 fatigue and people are reaching for candy bars and sugar thinking, oh, it's my blood sugar dropping. Well, it's not, it may be, but more than likely it's hydration. You're this little low-grade dehydration. And if you hydrate properly from the beginning of the day, then you'll notice those afternoon dips won't happen. So fatigue is a interesting, not thought about, oh, I'm dehydrated. You think thirsty, those kind of things. By the way, if you're thirsty, you're sort of past subclinical or low-grade dehydration. You're almost at overt dehydration. And it's not.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, it's not a great sign to look for. It's, if you're thirsty, you need to do something about it, but you're too far gone already. Like we want to prevent being thirsty. You want to, sort of stave that off. But, there are people, as we get older, we lose our sense of thirst. There are people, we can learn to override our sense of thirst because we're so driven in our daily routines. So it's not the best sign to look for.
Yeah, when I'm tired, and I'm sure when a lot of people are tired, they've been told to, drink an energy drink or coffee. How often, let's say when you've been tired, have you had water instead, and did that wake you up, or did it just bring you back to a normal state?
Well, I think when I started to hydrate properly, I didn't get those dips that I used to get. Sometimes that's all you need is a good, maybe electrolyte drink or something like that, and it'll perk you up. Sometimes you need coffee, but the point is, once again, being in your body and knowing what your body needs, staving it off is key, preventing, those energy dips. And I think when you start to learn how to hydrate better, that is one of the things that you'll say, like, oh, I don't get those dips in energy like I used to get. And my energy is more sustained throughout the day. Because believe it or not, hydration is a source of energy in the body. It's not only glucose and food that provides energy. Hydration actually provides energy in the form of electrical energy, hydraulic energy. Hydration within our cells, it actually stores energy like a battery. If our cells are properly hydrated, we're storing that energy better in our cells as well. So,
what about sleep? I don't know, if you drink a lot of water before you go to bed, you may have to wake up and pee and disrupt your sleep. But if you don't, you're without water for 8 hours, let's say, what do you do there?
Yeah. So sleep is a really interesting subject because, first of all, it's only in our sleep when we detoxify, right? That's when our brain and our body shuts down. And that's when the major detoxification in our body, it happens when we're sleeping. So in order to detoxify properly, you need to be well hydrated, right? Because that's how we get rid of toxins. We pee it out, we poop it out, we sweat it out, right? So for that reason alone, we need to make sure we're properly hydrated. Sleep is, it's interesting though, it's so important. So we recommend in the book, Quench is the name of the book, by the way. We recommend that you front load your water, meaning you start first thing in the morning by drinking a big glass of water. You want 8 to 16 ounces. I tell people to put a little natural or real salt in there for minerals and electrolytes, or you could put a little squeeze of lemon for some more minerals. That's going to help absorb that water better into the cells. If you're drinking, and then maybe you stop a little, it depends on the person. When you stop drinking, if you're older, we tend to lose a hormone called ADH, antidiuretic hormone, that gets lowered. We lose it as we get older. And so antidiuretic hormone is exactly that. So it is higher at night and it prevents us from peeing at night. But as we get older, it doesn't work as well. So you're going to have to, once again, figure out what's the best time for you to stop drinking that doesn't make you wake up to pee in the middle of the night and interrupt your sleep, because sleep is up there with food, water, sleep, shelter. Those are the 4 things that you need to survive in this world. So I wish it was a little more sexy, because I wish I had an exact answer for you, and there just isn't. Everybody has to live in their body and find out what that set point is for them. I will tell you though, when you start to drink in the way that I'm going to ask you to drink, and I'll talk to you about it in one sec. In the beginning, you're going to find that, I'm peeing a lot more at night. I wake up to pee a lot more. But if you do it for a week, you'll find out that will also improve. So you got to also
good.
give it
Your
a
body
time.
gets used to it.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about
yeah.
when you first wake up? I mean, would a good simple protocol be like down a big glass of water with some salt in it and stuff the second you wake up?
Absolutely. It's what I do. I have a glass jar with one of those, a glass on top of it that it covers it at night. I have it ready to go first thing in the morning, so I don't even have to get out of bed. And that's how desert people hydrate, by the way. My co-author, Gina Bria, is a cultural anthropologist, and she did her research on how desert communities hydrate, and they front load their water. It's one of the things that they do. And, I've found clinically that it makes a lot of sense for people, and you'll notice that you'll feel better throughout the day, that your energy's better, you're less brain fog, so all of those things. Yeah, it's great. It's definitely a great practice to get into.
Just don't drink it in bed because you'll spill it all over yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. So one of the big sort of aha or things that we talk about in the book is that this is how I even started to write the book. Gina came and talked to me about the research that this very prominent water researcher, his name is Dr. Gerald Pollock, has discovered that there's a fourth phase of water. And I was like, what are you talking about? A fourth phase of water? We know that water exists as liquid, ice, and vapor, right? Well, it turns out that there's another phase of water. And this is a fairly recent discovery. And there's a bunch of scientists that agree with him. He's from the University of Washington in Seattle. And that fourth phase is, some people will know it as structured water or gel water. Dr. Pollock calls it easy water, stands for exclusionary zone water. And what we have found is that this is how water exists in nature, and it's how water exists within our cells. And so the whole premise of the book is about eating your water, meaning if we eat more hydrating foods, then we're going to, it's a much more powerful way effective way of getting our cells, properly hydrated. And, how many people do you know or yourself say, I drink water all day long. I can't quench my thirst, number one, like no matter how much water I drink. And number two, they're probably overhydrating, which is definitely a problem. I see at least one case a week of a patient that, I do their blood and their electrolytes, and their sodium and their chloride are very low in their blood. Their electrolytes are low. And I ask them, do you drink a lot of water? And they're like, yeah, I drink so much water. I'm really good at hydrating. And then I say, well, do you get leg cramps? They're like, yes, I get Charlie horses every night. Well, and I can't tell you, I see it often. We used to think it was rare to see that. I see it at least one person a week whose electrolytes are low in their blood.
But why? Okay, so
because they think they're doing the right thing. They think, by drinking. So this is what you need to do. Number one, you said it earlier. You need to, every couple of glasses of water, you want to put a little natural salt, meaning not table salt, not like the Umbrella Morton's table salt. You want to use either Himalayan pink salt, a sea salt. Real salt is a brand that I love. So you want to put, and that is the salt that has, all of the minerals, all the electrolytes in it. So a little pinch of salt in your water every couple of glasses of water. You don't need to do it with every single glass of water. And then the other thing is, instead of drinking so much water, focus on more hydrating foods. And the one thing, I sometimes get eye rolls when I say this, but I can tell you and your listeners that the single greatest thing that you can do as a lifestyle change is to add a green smoothie a day. It's, what does that mean? It's a blended greens. So it could be spinach, Swiss chard, kale, whatever greens you want to put in there, cucumbers, celery, with water. And then you can add whatever else you like. If you want to add a half a green apple for flavor, or a carrot for flavor, some ginger, lemon, whatever, chia seeds, peanut butter, whatever else you want to put in there is fine. But a green smoothie a day is probably equivalent to drinking like 3 times the amount of water from a hydration standpoint.
Well, that's good, because that would relieve the declaration, let's say, if I've got to drink a gallon of water a day, that's a lot of water. You have this instead, it would relieve that tremendously, or at least that feeling that you have to do that.
Yeah, and I have to say, there's actually some even newer research that's going on that's not quite out there yet, and it's still it's still very preliminary, but that we can probably survive on 1 glass of water a day. The problem is what's in that water. And this gets into things that I'm not that up on, but there is a chemical substance called deuterium, which is it's a hydrogen ion, and deuterium depleted water is thought to be incredibly well hydrating, and that we could survive on 1 glass of deuterium depleted water a day. But the problem is it's very expensive. It's very hard to find. You have to sort of get it. So it's more than I know. But all I'm saying is that there is some interesting research that only 1 glass of water, I know how many times in my life I'm like, wow, I have not drank water all day long and I feel great, but meanwhile I'm eating, salads, and I'm drinking a smoothie, and, I'm doing all the right things as far as other means of hydration. So, I would assume that there's a lot of people in yourself, like, gosh, I haven't drank a thing all day. How come I'm doing great?
Sometimes I say my wife is like I don't call her a water Nazi, but she's like, have you drank water? Drink more water. She like bugs me about it. And I'm, because I'm drinking coffee. And one time, I used to drink a lot of coffee. And I remember one time she made me a coffee and she took pictures of me because I fell asleep on the couch drinking coffee because it didn't work anymore. It was like backwards, maybe even more tired. So she thought that was hilarious that I was sleeping holding a coffee cup.
It's interesting. I have good news for coffee drinkers. And coffee, anything under 4 cups is not a diuretic. And that's what the research shows. So it's people always think that coffee is dehydrating. It's not necessarily dehydrating. There's caveats to that, though, because there is caffeine, and caffeine is a drug, whether you believe it or not. And whatever that caffeine was doing to you, like it's interrupting your sleep, even if you're having 1 cup first thing in the morning, it's interrupting your sleep at night. So I think it's a great drug. I drink 1 or 2 cups a day, but I also know if I have 3 cups a day, I am shaking, like I don't do well. So once again, we have to be in our bodies, what feels right for you. I do think I have patients that drink 6 or 7 cups a day, my Wall Streeters, and I'm like, that is not good. We need to pull back on that. So, caffeine is an interesting subject into of itself.
So, how can you modulate your water consumption? Like you said, have it with salt if you're going to have it a lot. Have it in terms of a green smoothie. What is like an idealized protocol, or maybe there's several variants of it to really hydrate you well and not be like slogging down tons and tons of water. Yeah.
So, well, let's first of all talk about symptoms again. So fatigue is one. Afternoon fatigue is one of the things you need to look at. The second thing you want to look at is brain fog. Is your brain really, functioning well? And are you thinking clearly? Are you thinking, are you on your feet? That kind of thing. The third thing, we're meant to urinate every 2 or 3 hours. So if you're during the day, and if you're not getting up to pee every 2 or 3 hours, you're probably not hydrated enough. Other things, are you constipated? These are things that you're looking for if you have this little low-grade dehydration. That's a big subject because it could be some other things, but some quick, sort of down and dirty things to look out for with proper hydration, right? So in order to feel these things the other big thing is, are you moving fluidly? No pun intended. Are your joints lubricated? Do you move freely? Are you able to bend and move and twist and turn? That's a sign of dehydration if you're not. And then the big things: thirsty, dry skin, chapped lips, those kind of things. You're almost overtly dehydrated at that point, right? So we do lay out a 5-day protocol, and we picked 5 days so that you could do it during the week. And it's really simple. You want to start by front loading your water. We talked about that. So a big glass first thing in the morning, 8 to 16 ounces. If you could do 16 ounces, fantastic. So you want to sort of soak all your organs, gulp it down, drink a nice big glass first thing. The second thing you want to do is try adding a green smoothie a day. We talked about that, right? The third thing is you want to eat more foods that are, a more plant-centric diet. So you need to have more greens in your diet. You want to have foods that are greens and fruits. Fruits are not the enemy. Well, gosh, coming from Dr. Atkins and the keto world and that kind of things, we've sort of, believe it or not, villainized fruits because of the sugar and that kind of thing. If you're not following a ketogenic diet or anything like that, then you want to eat, a few servings of fruits a day, and those are really hydrating. Another little tip that I like to do is I have, 1 glass of water before every meal. So like 10 to 15 minutes before every meal, you want to sort of front load that meal with a big glass of water. You'll find that you get fuller, maybe not eat so much during the meal. That should be a rule. A big glass of water, 15, 20 minutes before you eat your meal.
Yeah, if, growing up, I remember, some families saying, oh, you shouldn't drink while you eat. And I always thought, well, I'm going to die. I'm going to choke to death in the food. And, they're like, then you can eat more food. And, so I always hated that. I'd rather drink with the meals and all that stuff. And,
well, but there's some thoughts about, I think it stems from a couple things. Drinking during the meal definitely dilutes sort of like your stomach acids that are going to break down the food. That's why we're saying, there's no controversy about drinking 15, 20 minutes before your meal. And in fact, there's some research that shows by doing that, if you're dieting, you'll lose 5 pounds more just by drinking that glass of water before the meal. If you have to drink during your meal, which I do, but the other thing is, your belly, it tends to, how do I say this? It tends to dilute your food so that your belly, it pushes the food out of your stomach into your first part of your small intestine. So you're also not allowing your belly to get full before you're diluting it with water. So I think there's a couple reasons why you shouldn't drink so much with your meal. But
it can affect the transit time. And
it can affect the transit time.
I guess some things need to have a slow transit time through the stomach to be digested a lot at that stage. So
yeah,
having water would negatively affect some foods more than others because of the transit time.
Yeah, and you want your stomach to do its job. You want it to start with the acids. You want it to fill up too. You want to feel full. So for those reasons, and then the digestive enzymes too maybe plays a role too. So there are some reasons maybe not to eat during the meal, and a lot of people really swear by that. But there's no controversy in drinking before the meal. And in fact, there's some good research that's a good thing to do. And I think if you're dry, like your saliva is dry when you're eating and you have to drink a lot of water, that's also a sign that you're probably not well hydrated, beforehand, during the day kind of thing. So if you get into this practice of feeling what it feels like to be well hydrated, then you might not need as much water during your meal.
What about when you're, I've heard that people, when they get older, their perception of thirst decreases. So how do you make sure, does anyone set like a water clock, with reminders throughout the day to have like at least a little bit of water if something's wrong with them and they don't perceive thirst?
No. So let's go back to our proper day of hydration. You start with front load your water, a glass of water before every meal. You want to eat more hydrating foods. You want to have a green smoothie a day. And that in and of itself, your people will notice a huge difference in their hydration. And then you could drink, if you want to drink more water throughout the day, you are more than welcome to, and especially if you need it. But once again, you have to live in your body and see what feels right and what feels good. Are you peeing every 2 or 3 hours, or are you not? God knows there are days that I'll sit in my office for 10 hours and not get up once to pee. And I'm like, oh, I did not do well today. I have not hydrated. I've not eaten well. All of those things. So it's the big picture here. This is, it's not I can't give you a number on how many glasses of water to drink a day. It just doesn't exist. It's not, there's no research that says that 8 glasses of water a day. It never came from anything. There's never ever studied. It came from probably a nutritionist sitting around saying, oh, this is what we think. But how can you say that 8 glasses, from the difference between a 4'11" woman to a 6'4" athlete who is, sweating all day long? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
There's a lot of just rules of thumb like that, because then it's easier. You don't have to go into individual stuff. They're not good, but there's tons of stuff like that. One size fits all stuff.
Yeah. But like people who, if you eat the way I'm going to ask you to eat, meaning more vegetables, these few things that I've already given you, putting more minerals into your water, you might not even need 8 glasses a day.
A friend of mine is on dialysis.
Yeah.
You'd be horrified to know that, they try to tell people on dialysis, only drink this much water, don't drink much. And, he was eating watermelon every day. And that's when I first thought, wait a minute, they're telling him not to drink much water, but they say nothing about the food that he eats. So the water content of food, I'm sure no one talks about that. And, again, because he had watermelon, it made me think about that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, that is, that shows you, right. It's the power of that, that watermelon is so hydrating from a cellular standpoint. That's going to get into his cells and really be absorbed and utilized properly by his cells versus plain water that he drinks. That's just going to go through him and pee it out. I tell a story. Oh, I don't think I told it in the book, but when I first started to really think about hydration and how it affects me, I remember I went to a conference, and the conference was in Las Vegas, literally in the desert. And
a hydration conference in the desert.
No, it was actually a regular conference, a medical conference.
They should have a water conference in like the Atacama Desert in Chile or something, the driest place in the world. It would be ironic,
That would be nice. We had last year was in Sofia, Bulgaria. And then in Germany, Frankfurt, Germany. That's where I was last year. But so here I am at my regular medical conference. And, conferences are pretty grueling. You're sitting there all day long under these horrible lights and sitting on your butt all day. And you have to you're trying to listen to lecture after lecture after lecture. And they're hard lectures. You're trying to get all this information, and it's exhausting. And I remember saying to myself, all right, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do really well. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm going to drink so much water. And I sat at that table, and lecture after lecture, I would drink and drink and drink. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was getting up to pee, after every lecture. And by the end of the day, my pee was crystal clear. Like you couldn't even see it. There was no, and I was exhausted. It didn't do anything. And I was still, thirsty. And then I remember a few months later, I went to another conference in Arizona, literally again in the desert. Now those people know how to hydrate, because they would have at the front desk in the hotel, they had these water pitchers that were filled with like lychee fruit. Right? Yes.
Yeah, I like those when they have those in hotels. It makes them nicer.
But it's so much more hydrating. Like they know how to do it. And so I followed my own advice and front loaded my water. I drank a smoothie. I was eating better. And I was like, by the end of the day, I was like in tip top shape. I was ready to go out. I was ready to have dinner. I was ready to party at the end of the day. It was a very different experience. And I think that's what I mean about feeling what it feels like to feel properly hydrated.
So are you investigating why plain water doesn't work well, and are you tying this into Gerald Pollock stuff? Like, are you doing any research in that regard, or at least just what they call anecdotal testing with patients, which is probably more real than anything else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely, the first thing I talk about when patients come into my office on their very first visit is about their hydration practices. And before I even do any kind of treatment with them on that first visit, I will give them, I'll give them the 5-day plan. This is what I want you to do. Try this on. And then while we're waiting for your blood work and your lab work to come up and checking your thyroid and whatever else it may be, they start there. So yeah, I'm not a researcher though. I don't, it's more of an N of one study, meaning, that's the age old one person, do it on yourself. But I know, Dr. Pollock, I know him very well. And we've discussed this a lot, and it's really become quite a fascinating, interesting subject. But I think if you just ask patients to try those two things on, like try on a big glass of water in the morning, do whatever you're doing anyway, and then try these two things on, 1 big glass of water in the morning and 1 green smoothie a day. You will notice a huge difference. And I can't tell you how many patients notice just doing those two things, a big difference in how they feel.
It's really simple. I mean,
it is very simple.
Anything crazy, so that's good.
It's very simple. And even in quarantine, I've told patients, like, go buy some frozen berries and frozen things that you can make your green smoothies if you have no access to fresh greens and that kind of thing. And get a cheap blender. It doesn't have to be, a $400 Vitamix blender. Get a cheap blender, throw some greens in there, throw a little water in there, play around with ginger and lemon and fruits, and there's 1,000 recipes out there for smoothies. I would say though, I wouldn't do like yogurt based smoothies. That's not really what I'm talking about, or protein shake based smoothies. I'm talking about more vegetable based, green smoothies. Is you want to try to limit, unless it's a meal replacement, then you can maybe throw a little protein stuff in there, but that's not what we're talking about here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other nuance or other things do you want to explore within? Sounds like you've got your hydration dialed in. You're helping patients, which is good. But like, what's the next step to take this further? So
the other big idea in the book, and this is something that's really fascinating and really interesting, is that movement. So just moving our bodies is actually a hydrating act. And I'm going to tell you why. So we, a few years ago, there was a brilliant French doctor who decided to put an electron microscope camera under the skin of a living person to look at that person's fascia. Fascia is this connective tissue that surrounds every cell and every organ in our body. It's this webbing that's all over our bodies. And before this, fascia was only ever looked at under like dried, desiccated cadavers, right? And when you look at the footage, you realize that, and fascia, by the way, has become very, very in vogue right now to talk about fascia. We're really studying. People are very much studying fascia now because it's quite interesting. And so what he discovered, and when you look at the living fascia or live fascia, that it moves hydration. So it literally, you see water droplets getting moved along. So fascia actually acts as a hydraulic pump. So the idea of, we've always known or been told you have to move your joints to lubricate them. Well, now we really understand why. Because when you're making a muscle in your bicep, you're literally squeezing fluid in and out of your elbow joint. So movement acts as a hydraulic pump, which is interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting because we've only ever thought that, fluid gets moved via blood and lymph, and then down to the capillaries and that kind of thing. But fascia is a way of hydration, how hydration gets distributed throughout our body. So,
yeah, and since water is such a great carrier of so many things,
yes,
that's the medium by which a lot of things move around our body too.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, why sitting, once again, is the new smoking, because we're squelching delivery of hydration to our periphery. So you want to get up and you need to move around. We lay out in the book, Quench, we lay out some very simple movement things that we need to do. We've all become so sedentary in our daily lives. I like to use this example because when it hit me, I was like, wow. Even in our cars, I remember backing out of your driveway, you have to put your arm over the seat and turn around to look behind you. Now we have those cameras in the front of our cars where we don't even have to do that anymore. We're no longer like twisting and turning and moving. And so we need to make a concerted effort to sort of move every joint, and we call them micro movements. And it's not in place of exercise, it's in addition to exercise, but very simple movements that you should do on a daily basis from head to toe. You can make that up, like, nod your head up and down, that's a micro movement. Do your shoulder spins, twist and turn, and that's wringing, it's almost like wringing fluid in and out of your spine. So it's really important to move and do these micro movements as a hydrating act, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Again, there's probably a big difference doing it in a unhydrated state versus a hydrated state.
Yes.
I would think that if you hydrate first properly, it'll probably, it would drive the water in better to the right places, to be more of it, to drive into the right places, and the whole thing would be much better than it otherwise would be.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why, like, moving fluidly is one of the symptoms that you want to tell you if you're a little dehydrated or not. Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, where can people get your Quench book?
Anywhere books are sold, Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's on Audible, and then the book. It's called Quench, the new science behind optimal hydration, and it's me, Dr. Dana Cohen, and my co-author, Gina Bria. And I'm getting really good, interesting feedback from a lot of estheticians, skin people. So it's really good for your skin. And then the detoxification is the other big part of why and how we should need to be properly hydrated.
Yeah. What's funny is if you go anywhere for any kind of treatment, whatever it is, and they give you, let's say, a glass of water with like some fruit in it or lemon, whatever it is, the person will probably feel better, and they'll credit you and or the treatment with making them feel better than without giving them that. So it'll probably help your business.
Like at the end of a treatment, you're saying,
beginning or whatever, So
yeah, but it really does. I mean, especially when you're after like a massage, to drink that water, and it's so much better with a little lemon wedge in there, because those minerals are going to help keep that water, help get it into your cells better. After especially moving all that fluid from a massage or something, you've also just detoxified from that. So get that fluid in there, then we'll help expel it all. It's great. It's great practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, Dana, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Richard, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.